Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. And today's episode is Criminal Minds, Season 1, Episode 21, Secrets and Lies. The episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happens in the episode. So the episode begins with a man approaching a woman and her children who are frantically running around a dock area, and he directs them into the car, telling them to trust him one last time, before we then see that same man walking into an apartment and being accosted by a couple of people. It is then heavily implied that he was tortured, before he then looks up and is like, "Oh, I knew it would be you," and then his neck is snapped. We then see a bunch of government officials coming in, undoing all of the evidence of the torture, and staging a suicide, which is when we see Gideon coming in and looking at the paper and calling someone on the phone, stating how he's seen that the newspapers reported on the death of a mutual friend. We then see Jason entering into the office of another government worker, Bruno Hawks, who basically says that they need to keep this in-house, but that it wasn't actually a suicide, and that before he was killed, he had hidden a family, which the woman was an informant against her husband, who was a known terrorist, who basically she was brought to America to save her from her husband. And then he came to America, which means that he knew about the fact that it was staged, which is why she then needed to be moved. She's been hidden away, but now the person who hid her is dead. Therefore, now they have to try to find her. But not only that, the only way the husband could have found out, because they had faked the death of the mother and children, was to have a mole, and therefore the team is brought in to find the mole. There are 4 suspects of people who it could have been. And while they're there, basically the episode is each of the team members kind of takes one of the people aside who it could be and have conversations with them, trying to gauge whether or not they potentially could be the mole. And in the end, they do realize who the mole is, and it does happen to be Bruno. And they do manage to find, thanks to a recorded interview between Gideon and John, who was the one who died, he left basically coded hints as to where the mother and children were in the interviews, and using those hints, they're able to discover that he put them in a shipping container, and because they were in the shipping container, they're able to find them, but not before the husband finds them. Once the husband finds them, he luckily does not have enough time to do anything terrible, and he is then arrested. And then they kind of stage his murder in order to flush out the mole, and that does in fact succeed. And that is what happens in this episode. So now that we've been reminded about what happened, it's time to rank the episode. As always, we'll rank on our mostly objective ranking list, followed by the personal ranking list. And on our mostly objective ranking list, we have our single episode supporting character introductions. This episode had quite a lot because there is a focus story. So instead of having like a serial killer with multiple victims that you see for like 2 seconds, it's pretty contained. You see the family drama happening on one side, and then the CIA investigation happening on the other, but it's all within enclosed spaces, so there aren't a lot of excess characters. Every character that's there serves an actual purpose. So we had Aaliyah Nadir and her children, who was the informant against Hassan Nadir, which was her husband, and who was working with terrorist organizations. Then you had John Summers, who was the agent who brought Aaliyah to America and was helping to hide her, and also is the one who hid her before being tortured to death by Hassan and Bruno. Um, but then that means people have to find where he hid them, because otherwise they could end up dying. And we do see that in the shipping container where they are contained, that they're running low on water, running low on food and light sources, because they weren't meant to be there that long. John was supposed to come back for them, but obviously he couldn't because he did pass on. Then we have Bruno Hawks, which is the one who brings in Jason and the rest of the team. And he had to do that because John had an evaluation from Gideon 3 days before he died. And he actually, it turns out, was the one who ordered it on himself. But that's what gave the team the in to find Bruno. And then the other three that it could have been was Gina Sanchez, who ends up in a little bit of a flirtation with Morgan in the episode, and she is the one who helps stage the flushing out of the mole. Kruger Spence, who is the one who is framed by Bruno to take the fall. However, the rest of the CIA agents know it wasn't him, and that's why Bruno ultimately does get caught, because Gina sends a message to Kruger that we know it's not you, Bruno is the mole, which is why the team allows the flushing out scenario to play. And then we had Olivia Hopkins, who was in an affair with Kruger, who was married, but her own marriage had fallen apart, and she had a bit of a traumatic past and field assignments, which is why she wasn't on field assignments anymore. And she realizes Bruno was the mole first and goes to look into his financial records, only to then end up killed by Bruno herself. But that is 7 characters, so that's 7 points. And then we have positive 4 points for the multi-season main character development, which is learning that Jason does like some side work for the CIA in addition to his FBI job, and he often is the one who performs the psych evaluations for the various CIA agents, who have to get them regularly due to the nature of the work that they do. So that brings us up to 11. But there were some negatives, obviously, negative messaging or behavior. We have treason, or not even just treason, but just betrayal as a whole concept. I mean, Kruger cheated on his wife, that's a betrayal. Bruno was a mole, causing harm to his country, that's a betrayal. Aaliyah was an informant against her husband, that was a betrayal. Her husband was abusive, so that was betraying the vows he took. Or, I don't know if that's the case. I don't know what the actual vows are in that religion. But typically, if you're marrying someone, you would be meant to have their best interests at heart and not harm them. Either way, the point is, everybody betrayed everybody. So that is minus 2 points. And then we had the semi-memorable tag to the episode. To be honest, I call it semi-memorable in this case because I distinctly remembered the wife and children and the situation of being locked in the cargo container, having to wait for rescue, and then the mom leaving to get water only to come back and find that her husband has found them, because that just so happens to be when the team figure out what happened and the phone line gets tapped. So I remembered that half, but I didn't really have much memory on the CIA investigation side of things, maybe because it all took place in one setting and there were a lot more characters in there and it was a lot less dramatic and more so a lot of conversations. But I distinctly remembered the mother and her children's side of the story, not so much the other side of the story, but that still makes it semi-memorable. So that was another minus 2, and that ultimately leaves us with a 7 out of 10 for this episode. And that brings our mostly objective ranking list to: in first, Extreme Aggressor, Natural Born Killer, The Tribe, Somebody's Watching, Compulsion, The Popular Kids, The Fox, Secrets and Lies. This episode is 8th, followed by Derailed, Blood Hungry, What Fresh Hell, LDSK, Machismo, Plain Sight, Riding the Lightning, Broken Mirror, Poison, A Real Rain, Won't Get Fooled Again, Unfinished Business, and then Charm and Harm is in 21st. My personal ranking for this episode is pretty similar to the objective ranking, though obviously my points don't come from the characters, but like I said, I did find the mother and children side of the story very compelling because I remembered it. Um, so that is a bonus. I did find the kind of intrigue side of things that was happening on the CIA side also really interesting. I did find it funny also that Penelope wasn't allowed to go with them to the CIA's section of the building because she's on a list. And then, like, immediately as soon as she gains access to the CIA computer system, her first thought is to find out whether Diana's death was actually an accident. And JJ points out that that's probably why she's on a list. And so I thought that was amusing. Um, there was the action at the end. They did do a good job of building tension. And honestly, the opening of the episode was really good with the kind of series of events of taking the children, taking the informant into the car, driving off. Then he walks into the apartment. Nobody knows what happened to them. And then he's, tortured, killed. And then it just shows him sitting there and then everybody else coming in and then staging the ending, followed by then the newspaper with Gideon. So it's just kind of like a really good flow of events to kind of establish the backstory of why they're being called in and what's happened so far and what the goal of the episode is. Also, this is a more unique concept as compared to other episodes because while they have worked before in like Charm and Harm that we just watched, they worked with another section of the FBI. And now this time they're working with the CIA, which is a completely different government organization that they're working with. Um, so it's not, I guess, as unique as I was thinking just a moment ago, because I remembered Charm and Harm. They did work with other FBI agents, but this is the first time I think they've worked with the CIA specifically, and that also gave it a little bit more of a memorable feel to it. And then, of course, they did the whole, let's mislead. First, they suspect this person. Oh, this person's ended up dead. Now they suspect this person. Oh, now this person's not following orders. And then all along it was this person. So I did find that they did make a very compelling storyline. I liked it. I gave it a 6 out of 10. The reason it was only a 6 out of 10 is that some of it was a little bit on the boring side. Like I said, like the half with CIA, it's unmemorable. And while it is more of like the intrigue side of things, it's not as interesting, at least to me personally. Um, and even with the memorable side, it was more showing like the experience that they were having being hidden away so that we as the audience knew where they were while the rest had to figure it out. I enjoyed it. I thought it had entertainment value, but the entertainment value was only at the level of a 6. But that brings my personal ranking to in first The Tribe, Somebody's Watching, Derailed, Riding the Lightning, Compulsion, Machismo, Plain Sight. This episode is also 8th for me, Secrets and Lies, followed by Extreme Aggressor, The Popular Kids, Unfinished Business, Natural Born Killer, A Real Rain, What Fresh Hell, The Fox, Blood Hungry. Charm and Harm is in 17th, followed by LDSK, Won't Get Fooled Again, Broken Mirror, and then Poison is still last for me. And now we come to the series ranking so far. And on our mostly objective ranking, we're at a score of 114 out of a possible 220. And then on the personal ranking side, we have a score of 102 out of a possible 220. But with that, we have rewatched and ranked Criminal Minds Season 1, Episode 21, Secrets and Lies, One more episode to go in this season. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I will see you in the next episode.